Hello my friends, Mia DeBolt here, bringing you more transparency in trading. Thank you so much for joining me today. So if you're new to this channel, make sure that you're subscribing below to follow me on this journey as I go from 0 to 7 figures of funding. Today was day 2 of my repeat FTMO challenge and day 2 of the funded trader. So this morning didn't have high probability conditions. It was a high resistance liquidity run and we had red folder news, which I like to wait until after the red folder news transpires so that I can see which direction price wants to go. However, it just didn't lend itself to high probability all the morning session, and so I just watched and tape read, stayed on the sidelines, and I also followed ICT on Twitter, so I had the ability to really study and see exactly what he was seeing, and then also just feel how the markets were really up and down, very choppy today. Okay, so without further ado, let's jump into the charts and you can see exactly which trades I took and kind of what my thought process was. Okay, so just like I said, this morning was kind of a choppy day and we did open up with a big range open gap, and so that's what this is the unfilled range open gap, and so that's kind of what I was looking to see if that was going to get filled. All of the indices were not in agreement, and so this was just a day that I chose to stay on the sidelines in the AM session and really just study price action. So the DXY also opened with a daily open gap up here and a daily open gap up here for the S&P, and so because it was both above price action, the current price action, I wasn't quite sure which way the price was going to go. So that's kind of the reasons that I was staying on the sidelines. I was expecting choppiness and I didn't want to get chopped up this morning. Okay, so that takes us to the PM session. So in the PM session, you can see that there's an opening range gap still that's unfilled up here. There's fairly equal highs up here, and the DXY has also pushed down. So there's still sell side down here. So again, it's still a mixed bag. And what I was expecting was, because we have this purple shaded area, which is the 1 hour breaker, I was expecting, because we had already dipped down below it, that we were going to start going for the new week open gap down below and for sell side. So I was looking at this as a bearish flag in the afternoon, and so this is 11:20 my time, and so that's 2:20, and so we are coming up to the last hour of trading, and that's when ICT talks about a macro running towards liquidity that hasn't been yet tapped. And so because I was thinking of sells, I wasn't actually in the mindset of buying here. So I was just watching. There's a 15-minute fair value gap. I was seeing this as a bearish flag, and so I had this set as a sell. So once it came up to the 50% of this range here, this last swing, then I was looking to sell. So I had the 1 hour median threshold of the breaker here as well. So there's a lot of confluences where if it did want to come down, there's still a 15-minute breaker right here. And so that's just other things that I was looking at, and so I was looking for a sell here. Okay, so this is where I like to practice on my paper trading, and so it looks abominable because every time there's an up candle, I'm selling. And so I'm selling maybe 5 contracts, and maybe selling 10 contracts, 100 contracts, it doesn't matter, so that price continues to inch up to where the actual ask line is. And so it's not a beautiful thing. It's my paper trading account. That's the whole reason that I have it. And so that's kind of what I'm doing right now, is just practicing selling with the up candles. All right, so here we go. I'm just going to fast forward this because I do end up selling this. Okay, so you may not be able to see this because it's in yellow, but I do have the sell side right here. So this is an old low that I was expecting to sell off of because it's at about the consequent encroachment of the 15-minute fair value gap. And so that's another place that I like to sell. It's at the low of the 15-minute breaker. And so this is another reason for me to just wait for my confirmations, just be patient and not be eager to push the button. Okay, so I'm gonna press play, and you can see here that there are no confirmations, no displacement on the downside, and so that was my first mistake. And so I just pushed the button. I'm in this for 1%, and now my heart is racing. I'm like, oh my gosh, there's no displacement on the downside. It does look like there's maybe a little black candle forming, and so I'm kind of in this just journaling and distracting myself. And so I'm looking at price action. I see a 5-minute volume imbalance that has been traded, and I'm eventually just going to close out my paper trading because I'm done paper trading. Once I'm in a live trade, I like to close out my paper trades. And so again, you can see that price is just continuing to climb. And so this is not a good sign. Already, I feel like I'm offsides. So I journaled this and I know what my feelings are. My heart was racing. And so immediately, I should have closed it. Even though I was underwater with my accounts, I should have just closed it right there. So I stay in this and you can kind of see what happens. Okay, so I'm gonna fast forward this because it does consolidate and it does give me a little bit of hope because it does go down a little bit and it does start looking like it's gonna start displacing to the downside. So I'm just watching price action, making sure that I'm breathing and making sure that I'm getting oxygen and not allowing the cortisol and that adrenaline to take over. But I already am in this, I'm committed to it, and so I'm just watching price action. So this retracement and this 5-minute fair value gap that is not being closed in right away, that's another sign that's just not good and it's not going in my direction. And so again, it's giving me a little bit of hope by just retracing and consolidating here. So I'm expecting maybe it to start displacing. I have a 1-minute fair value gap that I'm expecting this price to actually run away from. And so it does look like it's causing some resistance, which gives me again a little bit more hope. And you know, if I was so off sides, I could have closed it here and still been in profit for my FTMO. And so I do like to have the visual both on my trading view and on my MT4 because the MT4 is the CFD and this is the E-mini. So here's just another indication. Price is going up to that 1-minute fair value gap, but it's not running away. So it's not displacing to the downside. It's just continuing to consolidate. I do believe that it consolidates for 12 minutes or so before it starts displacing to the upside. So I was looking at this as fairly equal lows. So I was expecting at least that to be taken. So that was kind of where I was waiting to maybe exit, but it does start displacing to the upside. So that's something that I might do differently, is just not hesitate to get out and just sit on the sidelines and wait for this trade to really transpire and for my confirmations to really show up. Okay, so this displacement above the 1-minute fair value gap, that is another sign that I really should be out of this trade and just close it out and sit on the sidelines or maybe change my bias. And so this is kind of where I'm just hesitating. I'm journaling instead of really watching price action. And so I'm really just wanting this thing to turn around, but it doesn't. Okay, so I just cut bait here and I end up closing this out when there is a down candle. So I close this out and then I close out my 8 cap and the liquidity is above, there's buy side. I even have it up there. So I did take a loss of 0.79 on my FTMO and I took a loss of 0.93 on the funded trader. Okay, so now that I'm watching price action go up, this is where I am changing my bias. There is a open range gap that is unfilled here and there's buy side to be taken. So I am seeing confirmations for the upside. And so this is kind of where I'm just deleting this, taking a deep breath, moving to the sidelines and just waiting for that confirmation that is going to the upside. Okay, so it's 12:04 now and I am still waiting on that last hour macro, which typically happens from 12:15 to 1 o'clock my time. And so that's where I'm just watching price action. So I didn't actually step away from my computer like ICT recommends because I was expecting the price to actually go for buy side. And so because I had both of those biases kind of in my head and I was looking for price action to actually show that characteristic of going for buy side, I was just going to stick around and wait for those confirmations. Okay, so this is where I really got the confirmations that it was going to buy side. And so I had this 1-minute breaker already set up and it did react beautifully from this 1-minute breaker. So I was waiting for the market structure shift. And so that's kind of where I was looking for my entry to buy. So I was using that 1 minute as kind of the indication for a support. And so here's a 5-minute fair value gap. I'm kind of waiting on that as well. And so this is enough for me to want to just get in here. And so I'm expecting this to be a breakaway gap because of the time of day. So it does look like it's going to run away. However, it doesn't take this buy side yet. And so it creates fairly equal highs, which I'm really happy with. There's still a lot of fair value gaps down here. And so I'm just making this really messy. However, I do have 50% marked up and I'm watching where price action is. And so I'm watching if this is going to allow this 1 minute fair value gap to stay open, which it doesn't. And so that's kind of where I'm looking for this to continue up. Okay, so I watched where the 5 minute was closing and I really liked that it dropped down to the 50%. However, I wasn't expecting it to drop down to the 50% again. So I did enter on an up candle. I was chasing price a little bit and I was expecting buy side. So I had 0.5% on this trade. And so that's kind of where I was expecting buy side to be taken with ferocity because we are in the last hour macro. And if it's going to start going for buy side, it will start doing so quickly. All right, so it's 12:41. And so I am expecting price to actually start running away from this. But what it does is just consolidate. It creates fairly equal highs and it does kind of go down to the 50% again and then starts bouncing up. So that's kind of where I did have to endure just a little bit of retracement, but it does start displacing nicely and starts running for buy side. Okay, so it leaves a 5 minute fair value gap. So I am looking at 3 points of take profit. So I'm looking at the highs here, I'm looking at the high here, and maybe even the high here. So if it's going to run really strongly, then maybe even the algorithm open. So once it broke structure, that's where I trimmed my risk from down here to up here. So I am expecting buy side to start being taken, and I am expecting that quickly because we are coming into the last 5 minutes or so of the last hour. So it does start retracing a little bit into the 5 minute fair value gap. However, I am expecting speed and distance, just like ICT would say, and looking for buy side to start being taken with ferocity. All right, so I even say it here at 12:58, I say looking for speed and distance to TP. And so these 3 TP levels are what I'm actually wanting and expecting. Okay, so first mistake here is my TP level is set, but I am not set with my partials. So I did enter my partials a little bit late. I took 50% off of each of the trades, and so that was a little bit late. I did move my stops to break even, and so those are at break even now with structure, and so it shouldn't go anywhere lower than that short-term low. All right, so I took 50% off there, and I am expecting price to continue up. However, it is 101 already, and so you can start seeing where price actually goes. So now at FTMO, I'm at almost break even, 0.07. So I've recouped some of my morning loss. On the funded trader, I'm at 0.46, so I recouped a little bit of that loss as well by taking off half of the trade. Okay, so you can see that price just starts to consolidate a bit. So I don't know if you've ever traded past the 1 p.m. or the 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It does start just pittering out and doesn't really move much. And so that's kind of what I was thinking there. Just close out and take my profits for the day. So I was wanting to recoup all of my loss from the funded trader. However, it didn't end up happening, and that's okay. But I was in profit no matter what with FTMO, and so that was good. So you can see here that I just end up closing these out altogether, and it does look like price is just retracing a little bit, and I don't want to actually eat into my profits too much, so I end up closing them. So occasionally, price will actually go a little bit more at 115. However, I just wasn't willing to wait. Okay, so I ended the day with 0.09 loss on FTMO and 0.28% profit for the actual account. And I ended up with a loss of 0.31% on the funded trader and negative 0.14. So all in all, my day was kind of up and down. However, I really do feel like I traded effectively because I was waiting on my confirmations for the second trade. Now, the things that I might do differently is just wait for my confirmations and have that 1% risk on the trade that I actually win. So following my trade plan is first and foremost. Reducing my risk after a loss is really important, and I almost always follow that risk management. So for FTMO, that second trade was a 0.7% win on FTMO, and on the funded trader, it was a 0.62% win. So this is my FTMO account. I am on day 2, and I did have 2 trades today. So I took that loss, and then I took a partial here, and then closed out my trade in the afternoon here. And the funded trader, I'm also on day 2, and so I am at a little bit of a negative, but only 0.14%. So I am planning on that being positive by the end of this week, and so that's something that I'm going to be working for. Today I did take a loss initially at 1% risk, and then I got it back with 0.5% risk and almost got all of it back. So the big takeaway today was actually waiting for my confirmations for the sell, not just because I reached the zone that I was expecting price to actually react from. So my friends, I hope that you got value from this video, from watching my trading, because it's only going to get better. I'm only going to continue to improve as I continue to learn the lessons that I'm learning and also sharing those with you. So thank you so much for joining me on this journey. If you haven't already, subscribe below so that you do get all the videos that I make as I move towards that 7-figure funding mark. All right, my friends, till the next trade, we'll talk to you soon. Bye.